Well, Vivek Ramaswamy might not win the Iowa caucus, but boy, oh boy, do we love it when he puts a beat down on the political journalists covering that state. And he did it, and we're going to enjoy it. Also, a couple of Biden's nominees for the bench have stepped down. They were atrocious. They didn't know what they were doing. And Senator John Kennedy can claim the scalp. We'll remind you of how great that was. Paul Krugman wrong about the economy again and again. And we're about to have a real problem in our military with our recruitment numbers so low. And a new analysis tells you exactly why it's so low. It's because white men don't want to join the military. But, when was the last time an American war was won by white men, right? Am I right? Ooh, we're in trouble. We better break it down, and we're gonna right now. Hey, I'm Larry O'Connor. Thanks for joining us here today. Call me Larry. Call the show Larry, too, since, that's the name of it. And thanks for watching on all of our Town Hall platforms, whether it's townhall.com or Hot Air or PJ Media or Red State or Bearing Arms, or if you're watching us on social media. In fact, if you are watching us on social media, please do like and subscribe, get notifications, and put comments in there. And if you see some comments that you disagree with, well, tell them what for. Argue with them. I love that. We love that. First Amendment and all, right? Free speech? Exactly. We better get to it with Vivek Ramaswamy in the great state of Iowa. Now, he's painting the entire state, left and right, north and south. He's going all over the place, and he's trying to drum up some people to get to the caucus for him on Monday. Right now, he's not looking great in the polls, but, on a caucus, anything can happen, especially with the weather report showing that it's going to be about 4 below. Now that Chris Christie's out of the equation, well, you never know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. That's right. I'm one of the only political pundits who's coming out in front of you and actually saying, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I'm assuming Trump's going to win, but we don't know for sure. What we do know for sure is Vivek Ramaswamy is great when he turns the tables on the liberal media. And that's what he did yesterday in a exquisite fashion. Let's watch together.
If this is okay, and I'm just kind of curious on the previous question that you those 4 things that were provably false.
Yes.
And I'm just kind of curious. I know some of these guys, we've been following some of you guys. I'm curious if there's any national media who actually believe that they were wrong.
All right, so a quick setup here. He's got a couple of people that he's campaigning with. They might be state legislators or local politicians in Iowa. And Vivek Ramaswamy made the point of 4 provably false items that the mainstream media has gone nuts with over the last 5 or 6 years, having to do with Trump and Biden and Hunter and all that stuff, right? And he laid out these 4 provably false things. He's about to go through them again. And the question here is, the media reported these things. They are provably false. The media was wrong. Have they ever apologized? Have they ever admitted that they were wrong? So watch what happens.
Actually, it's a good question, Eddie. So Eddie's one of the, you guys are colleagues, 2 of the top state reps here. And I think that's a good thing to be curious about. Just by show of hands, who here is willing to admit that the Trump-Russia collusion hoax was indeed incorrectly reported by the mainstream media? Is there anybody here able to admit that was incorrect reporting?
It wouldn't be really appropriate for us to answer a question like that.
Why not? Why would that be inappropriate? I think it would be inappropriate. What's inappropriate is lying to the public.
We're doing our job asking you.
Was the public lied to, or did the media report on this set of facts that were provided?
So that's a fair question. I actually think that the public was lied to long after the media systematically still understood that this was the product of the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier was a piece of Russian disinformation provided by the Hillary Clinton campaign that was served up to the federal government as a basis for issuing a FISA warrant to then potentially infiltrate a member of the opposition party. If this was Bush and Cheney doing it to John Kerry, this would have been the stuff of scandal, impeachment, and worse. And yet, I think it was an intentional lie that the media said that account, which we now know to be true, was actually the Russian disinformation. Now, Shauna, I would be charitable in my interpretation of that if it were just one instance. Let me give an easier one. Just by show of hands, does anybody believe the media's reporting about the origin of COVID-19? ran flatly in face of the facts that you have a Wuhan Institute of Virology that was now the likely origin of the COVID-19 pandemic. You all said that it wasn't for a long time. By show of hands, was the Wuhan lab the likely origin of the COVID-19 pandemic? Everybody, media or not. So you have reported, the same media that has reported that the COVID-19 pandemic did not originate in a lab in Wuhan is willing to even say, unwilling to admit today.
The report came out in 2023, so I guess
it was known that there was a Wuhan Institute of Virology where they were conducting gain-of-function research, the very city which was the origin of a global pandemic. And yet the media's explanation was that somehow it could have been any source other than actually having started in a lab.
Yeah, and that I want to. There's more to this, and it is great. And I let it go for a while because it's so pristine and it's so perfect. And the casual nature, where he's holding his iced coffee and taking sips as he completely eviscerates and exposes the lying news media. I'm more concerned with the people who refuse to even participate, that they just sit there and they watch. And you heard the first guy say, "Well, it would be inappropriate for us to respond to your question. We're here to ask you questions." You see how they get away with this? But of course, we know now that their job is not just to ask questions of politicians, because they take it upon themselves to fact check in real time, right? Because they try to own the pristine mantle of the truth. They feel like they're the ones responsible for fact checking politicians. Of course, they only fact check on one side of the political equation. But by taking on the responsibility of fact checking, it's implied that they are the sole possessors of those facts, of that truth, that they're the ones who universally know what the truth of a matter is. And then when they're challenged on the facts of a story that they claimed to have the truth on years ago, and it turns out they were wrong, well, they refuse to participate in that. They refuse to be fact checked. Oh, it would be inappropriate. That's not our job. That's not our job. You see, 6 years ago, if you said to a journalist, or if you were campaigning and you said, the entire Russian collusion narrative is false, the Steele dossier is a fake, and in fact, it's a product of Russian disinformation that's made its way into Hillary Clinton's hands during the campaign, and it was then given to James Comey at the FBI, and they scandalously took it and used it for a FISA warrant to spy on the Trump campaign and eventually spy on the Trump presidency. These very journalists in Iowa would fact check you and say that you're peddling in misinformation, that you're lying. But of course, everything that I just said and that Vivek just said is completely true. That's exactly what happened. But now they just want to move on, because the facts have changed. Same thing with COVID. You just heard that reporter say, well, the report about the Wuhan lab didn't come out till 2023. Okay, well, first of all, they buried the report when it did come out, and there were no apologies to Senator Tom Cotton or to Tucker Carlson or to anyone here at Town Hall who was investigating and asking questions about that lab at the time. Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, various conservatives on Capitol Hill who all said, hang on a minute, China is responsible for this thing. They want to tell us that it came from a bowl of bat soup when they've got an Institute of Virology right there in Wuhan. Well, I mean, what are we talking about here? We were all fact-checked. We were called liars. We were called peddlers of misinformation. Oh my, you're talking about that. That's xenophobic. You're going to get Chinese people killed here in the States. There's going to be hate crimes against them. Do you notice how the media always jumps to that conclusion? Where is their brains, right? I mean, you tell me that the COVID-19 virus came from Wuhan, and the last thing in my mind is, oh, well, Chinese Americans are going to get beat up on the street. Of course not. That's ridiculous. Have a little more respect for the American people than that. But of course, the American news media doesn't have any respect for the American news media. So there's two right there that Vivek Ramaswamy lays out for you. Two items, factual bits of information that if he or Ron DeSantis or any person in the mainstream media, any person in the conservative media, right-leaning media, a talk radio host, or yours truly, if I said that 2-3 years ago, I would be shamed. I would publicly be completely lambasted. I would be censored. Our articles or our videos would be demonetized on social media by these very people. And he's got more.
I just think that that's systematically unacceptable. The Hunter Biden laptop. Is the Hunter Biden laptop story, as reported by the New York Post, which was shut down, had the Twitter account locked for anybody who is even sharing the story of the Hunter Biden laptop found on the eve of the last election? The media reported that it was Russian disinformation on the eve of that election. Does anyone here agree that the Hunter Biden laptop story, as reported by the New York Post, was indeed accurately reported and was not Russian disinformation, but was in fact a factually owned laptop of Hunter Biden? I mean, you got to, man. I mean, your paper reported it. Does everybody?
Yeah, okay, real fast. The one guy who raised his hand is a New York Post reporter, right? That's what Vivek said. None of the other journalists, even now in this setting, they refused it. Now they're just going to say, well, we're not going to play this game. We're not going to raise our hand. Really? Because last time I watched a Republican debate, that's what the journalists who are moderators constantly want you to do. Okay, everyone raise your hand if you agree with climate change. They always try to box Republicans into this, but they refuse to play the raise your hand game. These are political journalists, and none of them, even at this moment, will admit that the Hunter Biden laptop story wasn't disinformation. Why? Because they'd have to admit how wrong they were. Not just how wrong they were, but how they meddled in the 2020 presidential election. How they willfully altered the results of the 2020 presidential election by lying and accepting the lie and rebroadcasting the lie that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. Because understand how damaging that lie was. It would have been one thing for them to say, well, this story is being reported by the New York Post. We haven't been able to independently verify it, and therefore we're not going to cover it. No. They didn't do that. They didn't say, we can't independently verify this story, so we're not going to promote it. We're not going to talk about it. We'll get our reporters on it. They didn't do any of that. They did the opposite of that. They actually told you that the story was a lie. Now, they never independently verified that it was a lie. They just took for granted this letter that was provided to them that was engineered by the Biden campaign saying that 50 retired members of the intelligence community believe that this is Russian disinformation. That's what they reported to you. They reported a lie to you, and that lie was powerful because that lie not only negated the truth, which was that Hunter Biden is a corrupt criminal and that his father participated in the crimes. It did more than that. It implicated Donald Trump as a peddler of Russian disinformation, because Trump and Rudy Giuliani and other people in the Trump campaign were saying, look at this Hunter Biden laptop story. Look at what's going on here. Look at the crimes involved here. And not only did the lie about Hunter Biden's laptop being Russian disinformation, not only did it kill the truth, but it even peddled an even more important lie that Donald Trump is in the pocket of Vladimir Putin and he will stoop to no lengths to win this election because he's an authoritarian liar. That's what the media told you 3.5 years ago. And now today, they still won't admit it.
Anybody else seriously not believe that?
I mean, I believe that Hunter Biden is suing Rudy Giuliani over the laptop, so I don't think so.
So you don't believe, so you think that it actually was the product of Russian disinformation, as was reported by the media? That was the basis for suppressing this at the time.
Over the Hunter Biden case, yeah. I'm not sure why we're talking about that.
Because it was election interference on the eve of the last election. And I think there's the same kind of election interference happening this time around. And I think it's happening, the early waves of it with respect to the treatment of my candidacy. And I think that that is likely to be a major problem heading into the next year, unless we're able to openly and transparently acknowledge the mistakes of the past. Without acknowledging the mistakes of the past, I think we are destined for an even more dangerous future. And I do not want to see a repeat of what happened in the 12 to 15 months leading up to January of 2021. I don't want to see that in this country. And I worry we're on a path to far worse than that until we have accountability 360 degrees for the mistakes that were made in that lead up. And the Hunter Biden laptop story and its suppression, Shauna, I do believe was a key part of the lead up to that. I think the suppression of the origin of COVID and the origin of the pandemic was a key part of the lead up to what happened in January of 2021. I think that the systematic suppression of speech in this country, even about debating the lockdowns, was a key part of what culminated in January 6, 2021. And as somebody who's looking to lead this country and hopefully, dare I say, reunite this country, I think it is critical, it is vital to the future of this country that we not repeat those same mistakes. And yet that's exactly what I'm seeing play out in slow motion, hiding in plain sight. And so it's my concern for this country that leads me to run for US president. It's my concern for this country that causes me to raise what aren't some ancient issues to be swept under the rug. I think that history is relevant to what's happening today.
You're muted, Larry.
I'm sorry, I muted myself there. Let me just say this: I don't think Vivek Ramaswamy is positioned right now to win the Iowa caucus or any of the early primaries. I don't know if he's positioned right now to be president or be on the ticket, but I am glad he is in this race. I am glad he is in this campaign. I know some of my colleagues, even conservative media colleagues, don't like him and they're not real happy with his participation. But that performance right there is exactly why I'm glad he's there. And I know for a lot of voters out there, they feel like Vivek Ramaswamy is the only one out there who's actually being frank and real and telling it like it is. And by the way, to that end, one other Vivek Ramaswamy video hit yesterday. He created this one himself. It was after Chris Christie announced that he was dropping out of the campaign. And I think it's kind of relevant. This didn't get much coverage at all. In fact, you probably haven't seen it. I know you haven't seen it on cable news or broadcast news. These are the places who say that they cover politics like no one else. They're covering the presidential campaign, and they've got, millions and millions of dollars worth of investment in Iowa and New Hampshire. And you're going to see all their fancy sets that they've built with all the lighting because they're on the ground. But they've missed this very important story. They didn't cover it at all. And this is coming from one of the candidates. Here, watch.
The system wants to narrow this down to a two-horse race between Donald Trump and a puppet who they can control. And it has become increasingly clear that puppet is not a Democrat. It's not even Gavin Newsom. It's Nikki Haley. It's in our own party. Well, today, one more step in that plot unfolds. Chris Christie drops out. Next up, I'm going to make a prediction. You're actually going to see Ron DeSantis join Nikki Haley's ticket. He's going to be her VP. The whole game, it's hiding in plain sight. Whatever it takes. And this system will stop at nothing. And I mean nothing. To eliminate Donald Trump from contention. It's disgusting. But the same people who have said they're not going to actually take a principled stand against Trump's removal from the ballot. Haley and DeSantis are both in that category. Do the math, people. That's next up. Ron DeSantis is after Iowa. Everybody, including Chris Christie, apparently got a phone call from Ron DeSantis. Panicked was the word that Chris Christie used. This is the way the plot's going. Ron may not know this. Ron DeSantis may not know this, but that's what his donors are going to make him do. That's what's coming next. Ron DeSantis will become Nikki's VP, whether or not Ron knows it. It's not really his choice. He's not the one in charge of that decision. And then the plot continues. We have to open our eyes and not fall into their trap. Our America First agenda cannot end. Our movement cannot end with Donald Trump when they take him out from contention. And if you think this system is going to even let this man get anywhere near the White House, we need to open our eyes.
Now, like I said, this didn't get much coverage, and I guess I can understand why in some cases, because some newsrooms may have said, well, this is just Vivek Ramaswamy going after Nikki Haley again, and he's peddling a conspiracy theory, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. That's you using your editorial judgment to decide what your readers or your viewers are allowed to see or not, which is a little troubling. Whether you think it's relevant or not, they should still see it. But it seems to me, and I've only been in the news game now after Andrew Breitbart recruited me into this world for about 15 years. But as a broadcaster and journalist, it seems to me that one of the presidential candidates predicting that Nikki Haley will end up being the nominee because Donald Trump will not be allowed to be the nominee, and that Ron DeSantis will be her handpicked running mate, that's kind of newsworthy. That's kind of noteworthy, isn't it? Vivek Ramaswamy yesterday predicted that Nikki Haley will be the hand-selected nominee for the Republicans. Where's that headline? Where's that panel discussion on Jake Tapper's all-important show? All right, now I don't know if you saw this story, but this is a pretty big one as well. You can see the headline at Reuters: 2 Biden judicial nominees withdraw from consideration. This was yesterday's story, late breaking yesterday afternoon. And you can see this is one of the candidates here, or nominees, for a lifetime position on the bench. This is a Washington State Superior Court judge. Her name is Charnel Marie Jelkengren. Now, she might look familiar to you. And there's a reason why she might look familiar to you, because about 8 or 9 months ago, we presented a video of her nomination process where Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana asked her a couple of questions, as he is wont to do. They were some pretty basic questions. Now, I'm going to play this video for you. This is from, like I said, 9-10 months ago during the nomination process. And I want you to remember that not only is this person a nominee for a lifetime position on the federal court, but she is currently a Washington State Superior Court judge. She is currently making life and death decisions with regard to law and order in the state of Washington. Watch.
Judge on the far end. Tell me what Article 5 of the Constitution does.
Article 5 is not coming to mind at the moment.
Okay. How about Article 2?
Neither is Article 2.
Yeah, I just want to say that my guess is that this judge at the most is 40 years old, probably in her late 30s, right? I'm not always a great judge of that, and I know it's inappropriate to talk about a woman's age, but I think it's relevant to make this point, because I know a lot of people would look at this and they say, well, he's asking her these arcane constitutional questions. I don't think Article 2 and Article 5 of the Constitution is very arcane. The Constitution is not that long of a document, right? But let's stipulate for that for a minute. Oh, this is could that most judges and lawyers don't have to deal with the Constitution at that granular level on a regular basis. She was in law school probably 12 years ago. And you have to take constitutional law. That's one of the prerequisites. I mean, unless you went to Harvard. God knows what the prerequisites are there. They've replaced the con law class with, Ibram X. Kendi's Am I a Anti-Racist Baby class, perhaps, over at Harvard. But assuming she didn't go to Harvard, because she can actually apparently put a sentence or two together. It's not like it was so long ago that she had to take that constitutional law class. It shouldn't be something that she can't even recall from her college days, which calls into question our law schools right now. But let's begin this again, because the questions are pretty basic. I mean, I would argue these might be things that a brand new citizen to the United States of America, a legal citizen, when they take their citizenship class, actually has to go through.
On the far end. Tell me what Article 5 of the Constitution does.
Article 5 is not coming to mind at the moment.
Okay. How about Article 2?
Neither is Article 2.
Okay. Do you know what purposivism is?
In my 12 years as an assistant attorney general and my 9 years serving as a judge, I was not faced with that precise question. We are the highest trial court in Washington state, so I'm frequently faced with issues that I'm not familiar with, and I thoroughly review the law, research, and apply the law to the facts presented to me.
Well, you're going to be faced with it if you're confirmed. I can assure you of that.
Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, the master of advising consent. Honestly, I don't know where we would be without him, to tell you the truth. That entire questioning process sort of called up certain vibes that should seem familiar to most people, right? I mean, you've all seen it.
Recent polls have shown a fifth of Americans can't locate the U.S. on a world map. Why do you think this is?
I personally believe that U.S. Americans are unable to do so because some people out there in our nation don't have maps, and I believe that our education, such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere such as, and I believe that they should, our education over here in the U.S. should help the U.S. or should help South Africa and should help the Iraq and the Asian countries. So we will be able to build up our future for our.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Put that woman on the federal bench. Put that woman on the federal bench, lifetime appointment. As long as she votes right on abortion. I mean, that was the vibe, wasn't it? When she couldn't answer what Article 2 was, that's when she went full on Miss Teen South Carolina.
In my 12 years as an assistant attorney general and my 9 years serving as a judge, I was not faced with that precise question. We are the highest trial court in Washington state, so I'm frequently faced with issues that I'm not familiar with, and I thoroughly review the law, research, and apply the law to the facts presented to me.
So the bottom line here, and the most important aspect of this story, is that after 10 months after that disastrous moment in the Judiciary Oversight Committee, that Judge Jill Kengren, has asked the Biden administration to remove her name from consideration. She will not be sitting on the federal court, although President Biden has every right to renominate her and submit her. Something tells me that I don't think that will happen. I do want to point out, though, that Senator Kennedy did a very good and smart thing yesterday when this news came down. He took to the X platform. He represented that video so everyone can see it, and then reminded everybody in a very gracious way exactly what's at stake here. President Biden sent us a nominee who didn't know the basics of the U.S. Constitution. Judge Kengren is right to bow out, but President Biden just keeps trying to put unqualified people on the bench for life. People who don't know the law have no business running our courtrooms. And yeah, it was very good for him to repost that video and remind everybody exactly what the Biden administration is attempting to do with our federal courts. It's also worth noting what the Biden administration is currently doing with our military. We've been, of course, covering the disaster of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin going MIA, not notifying everybody, putting the world in harm's way, and the horrific double standard that he has for the men and women who wear the uniform versus what he has gotten away with here. And it's one of the reasons, amongst many, as to why we have a huge problem with recruitment in the military. Well, we've got a new study out now that confirms, sadly, what most of us have been assuming with regard to that recruitment problem. This is specifically in the Army, where the recruitment numbers are the worst right now. According to military.com, the Army has seen specifically a sharp decline in white recruits, and more specifically than that, white men. The biggest chunk, the most significant chunk of the recruitment fallout that we're seeing right now in the Army is because young white men are saying, no, thank you. I don't want to have anything to do with that. And it's hard to blame them. It's hard to blame them considering the vast amount of rhetoric that you're getting from the Pentagon, that you're getting from flag officers, generals that are in charge of the military. Much of the rhetoric you get is that white men are the problem. White men are demeaned. White men are degraded. White men are defamed. And white men are told that they're not wanted in the military. I mean, literally. You know, in a second, I want to show you a recent recruitment video, specifically from the United States Army, that goes out of its way to communicate to white men that this is not a place for you. But before I do that, I want to show you what the military used to communicate to young men. This is a recruitment ad for the United States Marine Corps from about 6 years ago under President Donald Trump. This is how they told young men what kind of life they might have if they join the Marines.
Battles aren't won solely on the field. That's a common misconception. Battles are won within. Over enemies of fear, enemies of doubt. In that place where promises are kept. Promises to oneself. Promises to one's community. Promises to one's country. In the heart of every Marine, you'll find a promise. A promise forever kept. A promise of battles won.
Now, it should be pointed out that the Marine Corps, amongst all of the branches, they have continued to send that kind of message in their recruitment videos. And it should also be pointed out that of all of the military branches, they have the best numbers right now. In fact, for the most part, the Marine Corps continues to sort of hit their numbers for the most part compared to the other branches. And it's because they have not slipped into the same kind of woke LGBTQ embracing kind of messaging to make up their recruiting messaging. It should also, by the way, be pointed out that the Army didn't used to have the problem that they have right now. I want to show you one more ad. This was from the Army. This was about 4 years ago, again, under President Trump and under the leadership of the Pentagon back then. And put yourself in the mindset of a young man who's just finishing high school, maybe, or just thinking about college, and you're wondering to yourself, what do I want in my life? What do I want to, how can I better form myself as a young man and harness the energy and interest that I currently have? Look what the Army used to tell them. Again, only about 3 or 4 years ago. Good stuff, right? I mean, hard to deny that this is all powerful imagery, powerful messaging. And by the way, I mean, if it's really important to you, if you noticed in both the Marine Corps ad and the Army ad, you saw men, you saw women, you saw people of color. But it wasn't the major emphasis. It was just, hey, we are here to bring in warriors to fight and kill our enemy and grow in strength and dignity for yourself, for your corps, for your brothers and sisters, and for your nation. Now, compare and contrast that to the recruitment message we had recently under President Joe Biden and under the current regime in the Pentagon.
Raised by 2 moms. Although I had a fairly typical childhood, took ballet, played violin, I also marched for equality. I like to think I've been defending freedom from an early age. When I was 6 years old, one of my moms had an accident that left her paralyzed. Doctors said she might never walk again. But she tapped into my family's pride to get back on her feet, eventually standing at the altar to marry my other mom. With such powerful role models, I finished high school at the top of my class, and then attended UC Davis, where I joined a sorority full of other strong women. But as graduation approached, I began feeling like I'd been handed so much in life, a sorority girl stereotype. Sure, I'd spent my life around inspiring women, but what had I really achieved on my own? One of my sorority sisters was studying abroad in Italy. Another was climbing Mount Everest. I needed my own adventures, my own challenge. And after meeting with an Army recruiter, I found it.
There you go. Now, my favorite touch in all of that, I mean, it just talk about checking all the boxes. But I think my favorite box that was checked was that she went to UC Davis. I mean, come on. Don't tell me women's studies was the major. No? Poli-sci? Okay. Now, you see that as the message coming from the United States Army as their target for recruitment. And is it any small wonder that this is the headline? And by the way, I just want to be clear, that headline isn't completely accurate. It's white men. It's white men. There's two things happening in the military that's pretty obvious. There's two messages being sent from the infiltration of CRT and Ibram X. Kendi's anti-racist DEI woke political agenda, where members of the military were having to go through re-education camps to explain how they should be ashamed of their whiteness and their toxic masculinity. And the fact that thousands and thousands of soldiers were discharged because they didn't want to get the COVID shot. And the other message that's being sent by the military is not only do we not want you because of your toxic white masculinity, but who we do want and who we do want to fill our ranks with is, Emma, the UC Davis graduate with two moms. The other subtle message in there was that she disdained the idea that she was a stereotypical sorority girl. Because, even at UC Davis, the stereotypical sorority girl, was probably Christian and likes men. So that's the message. Those are the multiple messages that this military in just 3 short years has warped the military into sending. And now suddenly you're seeing that it's white men who don't want to go and join the army, which you may think is great because we need to repaint our military and we need to have our military reflect the diversity that is our nation. Okay, that's fine. If that's how you think, that's great. But recognize that you are currently repelling the very people that have single-handedly won every single major war that this country has ever engaged in. It was white men in the Continental Army that won the revolution. Oh, I know, Betsy Ross sewed a flag. It was white men who won that war and every war that we've had. I know if you watch a Disney movie, you will believe that if it weren't for black women who were good at math, we would have never launched a rocket to the moon. But that's a Disney movie. I'm sorry. The fact is our wars are won with the white men up until really we integrated the armed forces against Democrat Woodrow Wilson's insistence, by the way. The armed forces were integrated. Black members of the military are phenomenal, by the way. And they will be the first ones to tell you, if you talk to any black man in the military right now, they will be the first to tell you that their brothers on the front lines that they're relying on are white men. They work together as units and they win wars. And right now, our army has a huge shortfall of white men because they've been told they're not wanted. And it goes well beyond just the military, as Elon Musk has been pointing out with great gusto over the last couple of days. DEI is now hitting our airlines, where if you're a white male pilot, you're also not wanted. Here's a video that was shared by Libs of TikTok focusing on this issue.
People look at me like I'm a unicorn. They've never seen me before, and by me, a black female pilot. My name is Angel Hughes, and I am a first officer at UPS. I fly the Boeing 757 and also the 767. I've been in aviation since I was a young girl, all the way up through my adult life. I'd only seen maybe a handful of Black female pilots. So I created my own organization, Sisters of the Skies. The mission of SOS is to increase the amount of Black female pilots, and UPS invests in those programs. I believe UPS is doing a great job at recruiting people of color. One day, being a Black female pilot will be the norm. We feel representation absolutely matters. We can help inspire the next generation of pilots.
Now, I mean, that's going to make me use UPS instead of FedEx next time I ship a package. Listen, they're private business. If this is what they want to emphasize, go ahead. But it certainly sends the message that being the best pilot is not necessarily the first question that a company like UPS asks. They qualified pilots, sure. Do you just want qualified pilots that meet the bare minimum, and then after that, we're going to fill out all of our diversity quotas? Or do you want the best pilot? Do you want the best pilot, especially when it's not just your packages hurtling across space at 35,000 feet, but it's you and your loved ones in a passenger jet? Which brings us to, what do you got?
Let me jump in real quick. What did you notice how she said she wants a day where Black female pilots are the norm?
The norm, yeah. Oh, you mean
what do you think that means?
Did you interpret that as yeah? So you're interpreting that as when you walk into the cockpit, you basically only see Black women.
Yeah, I mean, if she wants that to be the normal standard procedure.
I guess charitably, what she meant was she doesn't want it to be like a unicorn thing, right? Just like if you see a Black,
I don't know anyone who believes that it is a unicorn thing as of today.
Well, that's a great point. That's a great point. So in other words, the unicorn moment will be when you see a white man as the pilot. Interesting. It brings us to this other terrifying moment. Now, this is an exchange between a pilot with, I'm told, has 15 years experience at this one runway, and a air traffic controller who, well, let's just say doesn't have as much experience.
For a short approach, if you're going to do a power off 180, that's my point.
Well, okay, I will remember that from now on, no problem.
Yeah, when you ask for a short approach, I expect you to turn your base and beam the numbers.
All right, this will be a full stop for 65 Charlie, and maybe we need to talk about that some more because you're the first controller in 15 years that's ever said that.
Well, I'm just, if you ask for a short approach is when you turn your base and beam the numbers. If I know you're a student asking for a short approach, I know you're out there practicing and you probably will extend. But if you're doing something other than a short approach, don't ask for a short approach.
Well, I will definitely look up the definition of short approach because I've never seen where it says you turn base and beam the numbers because I don't see how you could possibly do that.
Well, I Googled it, actually. I Googled short approach, and it said to turn your base a beam or before the numbers, and you will land probably touchdown around midfield.
Okay, well, then I apologize for requesting the wrong thing because everywhere else, short approach means power off 180, but that's definitely not what it means here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because I've worked at different airports. I don't know, but just
listen, and God knows I'm not a pilot, and I'm not sure exactly. And I'm sure that there have been plenty of pilots, and you can see them on the thread here at Libs of TikTok on this video as well. But I think one of the key tells here that maybe the pilot on that exchange has a little more experience than the air traffic controller is she said she Googled it. Kevin, she Googled it.
Yeah, that's not what you want to hear when you're in the
That's not what you want to hear. Hey, air traffic control tower, I'm trying to make my approach. What should I? Well, let me Google that for you. The good news is Google has just as many diversity, equity, and inclusion rules as that airport probably does, actually. Not all white men know what they're talking about, though, which brings us to Paul Krugman. Now, Paul Krugman is an economist over there at the New York Times, and he's got a recent column out there explaining away the problems with the economy, or most importantly, the problems that Joe Biden is having when it comes to voters in the economy. Because poll after poll after poll says that the American people are feeling like the economy is awful because, well, the economy is awful. But Paul Krugman has an answer because, Paul Krugman, when has he ever been wrong? He says that the economy is actually much better than what pundits think. The reason is it's MAGA extremists who are actually the problem here. I'm not kidding. Don't believe what you're actually feeling. The poor public perceptions that people are experiencing right now in the election are entirely about MAGA. You see that? If you're feeling the pinch right now, it's because of MAGA. He goes on to say, and I'm reading from the column, poor public perception about the economy is being promoted by MAGA Republicans who are angry that Donald Trump isn't still president. Indeed, weak consumer sentiment may be almost entirely about MAGA. It's been obvious for a while that views of the economy have become increasingly partisan. It's also clear that this partisanship is asymmetric. Republicans are much more likely than Democrats to say the economy is good when their party holds the White House and bad when it doesn't. You see there? If you feel like the economy is bad, it's really because you're just a MAGA fascist. Now, never mind the fact that car insurance has increased by 20.3%. Damn you, MAGA! Sporting event tickets, 15%. Veterinarian services, 10%. Car repair, 10%. Non-prescription drugs, 8%. Cigarettes, 8%. Baby food, 7%. Trash collection, 6.5%. Rent is up 6.2%. And eating out is up 5.2%. And guys, that's just in the last year, when inflation has been a little bit better compared to Joe Biden's first 2 years. But Paul Krugman will promise you that that's just because of Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans. RNC Research shares this year-over-year inflation in December went up 3.4%. That's twice what it was when Biden took office. The 33rd straight month with inflation above 3%. Prices up 17.3% since Joe Biden took office. But if you're Paul Krugman at the New York Times, it's just because of Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans. Oh, but there's more. Let's turn it over to CNBC, who did some analysis on inflation and what the dollar buys.
If you take core CPI, the actual index, which is seasonally adjusted, the read there is 313.216. That probably doesn't mean anything to you. It means something to me. That's the highest it's ever been. It's ever been. Now remember, Bureau of Labor Statistics brings out this number. Go to their website. When did COVID start? March of 2020? Okay, this is a decent number. That means Nov was the most updated we had prior to about 2 minutes ago. If you go to their website and you look at their CPI inflation calculator and you put in Feb of 2020, what you'll find is it takes $1.19 of Nov $23 to buy what bought $1 pre-COVID. Do it if you don't believe me.
Did you follow that? It went by fast. It's numbers, so let's do it again so you can watch it in real time.
And you put in Feb of 2020, what you'll find is it takes $1.19 of Nov $23 to buy what bought $1 pre-COVID.
Right. If you go to the Consumer Price Index on the Department of Labor Statistics, you look at the numbers at February of 2020, 1 month before COVID, and you put in $1.19, that's exactly how much it'll cost to buy something that costs $1 November of 2023, a month and a half ago. That's what's happened with inflation. And by the way, we know that inflation didn't start during 2020, during the Trump presidency or the last week of the Trump presidency. It all started when Biden came into office. It's his policies that have caused the inflation. So $1 February of 20, but basically 4 years ago, next month, $1 in February of 2020, whatever you bought then for $1 now costs you $1.19. But if you go over to the White House and you ask Karine Jeanpierre about inflation, she'll tell you this.
Communities across America are coming back thanks to Bidenomics and his Investing in America agenda, which have ushered in a small business boom, created good paying jobs with rising wages, strengthened local economies, and lowered costs for hard-working families. Bidenomics, it's working.
Bidenomics, it's working. You know, it's one thing to sit like I do and speak off the top of my head and tell you what I believe and give you my opinion. And hopefully it sounds believable because it literally is what I believe, right? But that's not always easy for people. But when you've written out a script and your job is to be the communications boss for the White House, you're the White House press secretary and in charge of communicating the message of the White House, and you've actually written this so you can practice it over and over again, and you still can't make it sound believable.
Communities across America are coming back thanks to Bidenomics and his Investing in America agenda, which have ushered in a small business boom, created good paying jobs with rising wages, strengthened local economies, and lowered costs for hard-working families. Bidenomics, it's working.
Does anyone believe this one? She doesn't even believe it. She can't even sell it to herself, let alone the reporters and the American people. And then she continued.
Wages are up, right, which is incredibly important. And so, look, one of the things I will say is that the cost reduction momentum over the volatility, right, if you think about Maganomics, which economists warn would worsen inflation with tax giveaways to rich special interests.
Oh, it's all rich special interest again. My God, it's just so boring and so tiresome, right? Again, you bought something in February of 2020, 4 years ago, when Donald Trump was still president. You bought something for $1. You buy that same thing right now, and it costs you $1.19. That's real. That's legit. That's the average thing, by the way. That's the Consumer Price Index, which takes a ton of things across various broad spectrums. Some things, it costs twice as much. Some things even more so. But if you ask Paul Krugman, the chief economist over there at the New York Times, he'll say whatever perception you have about the economy, it's really entirely about MAGA. Which begs the question, who is this Paul Krugman guy? Why should we even believe him, right? Well, let's take a walk down memory lane about some of Paul Krugman's greatest hits. When Donald Trump was elected president, the next day he predicted a global recession. That's right. This is Politico from 2016, November 9th, right after the election. Trump is the mother of all adverse effects. The Nobel Prize, he won a Nobel Prize for economy. The Nobel Prize-winning economist predicted that the Republican nominees administration could quickly undo the progress that the markets around the world have made in the 8 years since the financial crisis. Boy, oh boy, was he wrong about that. Oh, but the wrongness of Paul Krugman doesn't end there. After Joe Biden was elected, he wrote an article with the headline, "Making the Most of the Coming Biden Boom. The economic outlook is probably brighter than you think," he said, right after Joe Biden was elected president. And, well, we know what happened there. And if we go way, way, way back to Paul Krugman, back in the 90s, he predicted that the internet's impact on the economy would be no greater than the fax machine's impact on the economy. Now, you've probably heard that thrown around quite a bit. He said it in 1998. By 2005 or so, it will become clear that the internet's impact on the economy has been no greater than the fax machines.
That's got to be the worst economic prediction since Paul Ehrlich and Population Bomb.
Yes.
You know, like,
that's right.
That's so bad. That is so bad.
And it's so bad, Kevin, that you see it thrown around and people refer to it, and it's like, that can't be real. It can't be real that this guy is the New York Times chief economic columnist, and he was that wrong about the internet. So this article that we're looking at right now, is from Snopes. See, I hid that from you. It's from Snopes because I wanted to be sure that this was real. Fact check true. 100%. Paul Krugman's economic prediction, 1998. The internet, fax machine was more impactful. But this is the guy that the left loves. It's the guy that the New York Times still pays tons of money to give his economic outlook. And he's the guy that Democrats and liberals will continue to quote as the expert on the economy. Wrong about the internet, wrong about the Trump election and the economy that Trump brought to the world, wrong about Biden's economy, and certainly wrong today. But you're right today for watching, and we appreciate you doing that. You'll be even righter if you subscribe and like us and share your comments. Start arguing with people in the comments, by the way. We really like seeing the arguments, and we appreciate you joining us. Watch again next time. In the meantime, my name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.